Hey guys, Brian here with Better Chess Training, and we are going to continue our series on endgame studies. And this is the third study that we'll be solving together. And here it is white to move and win. And I want to encourage you to really uh, take the time. Like I said, usually 15 minutes is a good place to start. And if you feel you're on the right track, really give yourself a little more time to see if you can solve it before you look at the solution. So pause the video and continue it when you think you have it. Okay, I hope that you have your notebook ready and you wrote out your solution. I'm going to go through the solution as well as some of the side variations that I thought were very instructive, as well as show you some of the areas that I had struggled with too here. By the way, on the Patreon page, I have an annotated PGN of this study, and I will for all of the studies and games that I have here. So if you are interested in checking that out, click on the link below. But let's continue on here with the study. So it's white to move, and you can see here that material is about even, but the main idea here is that this F pawn, if we could somehow promote that, then that would maybe give us a victory. So that's kind of the maybe the starting theme you might want to look at. Now, of course, you want to look at all of the forcing moves, and there are three big ones here that I considered, and maybe you considered them as well. And the first one here is knight to F5 check. One is F5 check, and then the other big forcing move would be king takes E4. So those are the ones I looked at first. So let's take a look at knight to G5 check. And here you can probably calculate out fairly quickly that after knight takes G5 check, which is probably the first move you should look at, F takes G5, Rook takes G5, that white is not doing so well here. Black is the exchange up. This pawn is easily blockaded, and we should probably move on from here. From going back to the original position, king takes e4, and again we can see after king takes f7, we could probably figure out that this is probably not the solution, and we should look elsewhere. And so finally we have f5 check. This is the correct first move, and let's take a look at the idea here. So a couple options. Of course, black can take this rook. King takes f7. And if this happens, then we quickly win with f takes g6 check. And let's say h takes g6 to undouble those pawns, and king takes e4. And I hope you can see here that it'll be fairly easy to win these pawns, and this bishop and pawn can protect each other. And after you do that, you'll be able to promote one of these pawns. So king takes f7 doesn't work. So king takes f5. And from here, the next move, you played f5 check, seeing this, hopefully, that knight to h6 check needed to be explored here. And if we look at a couple moves here, we have king to e6, but then after f7, threatening to promote here, black can try something like rook to g1, but then we can just take this knight, and then we're up material because the knight is protecting this pawn, and of course black could try checking the king for a while, but the king can just approach the rook, and then this pawn will promote. Also, king to e6 doesn't quite work here either, because we can advance again. And notice here that this bishop covers the g5 square. Again, when I first solved this, for some reason I couldn't see this, from the beginning position. But then after I stepped away, maybe my subconscious was able to figure it out, and I saw that I could cover this square. So from here, that rook to g1 we saw, uh, but maybe knight to g5 check, and again, seeing here that that bishop covers, and after this, queen. And note here that this rook check is covered because this knight is here. Okay, so going back to knight to h6 check, therefore rook takes h6 is necessary. And here we advance the pawn, and now black has to try to stop it. Of course, rook to f6 is stopped by bishop takes f6, and so we look at knight to g5 check. And here we see bishop takes g5, king takes g5. Now, this is one of the beauties of studying endgames, these endgame studies, is that we need to look for not just white's best moves, but what are black's best moves. And here we see after knight takes g5, if we just go ahead and promote, then unfortunately black gets this check in. And then after the exchange, this is a drawn ending. So how are we going to relieve that? Well, luckily we have h4 check, driving this king away from protecting. Now, of course, king takes h4 is pretty easy. Then we promote. So we need to look for, and this is actually, I missed this when I initially solved it, is we need to look for the best move for black. And if you haven't figured it out yet, I would say even pause the video and just look for a good 30 seconds to a minute and see if you can find what black's best move is. Okay, hope you had a chance to check that out. If you didn't already, uh, black has to play king to g6. And now, again, white has to be very careful here, because if white just goes ahead and promotes, then we will be very sad because it is now stalemate. If you see here, black cannot move. And so that's the tricky part. So we go back. White has another trick up his sleeve. Hopefully saw the trick behind king to g6, and then played king or a f8, promoting to a bishop. And here the white king is going to have to move away from the rook. And after white wins the rook, hopefully you can understand that it will be fairly easy to win these two pawns, and also that the rook is the correct rook for the promotion of this rook pawn. If it was a light squared bishop, there would be a possibility, definitely chances for black to draw that ending. What's nice about, I know I've been mentioning this, what's really cool about these endgame studies is it really relies somewhat on your knowledge of the endgame, because some of these, as we've seen in previous studies, end in or knight and bishop uh, against a king, and you have to know those endings, those theoretical endings, to be able to, of course, win the game if this type of thing shows up in your games, but also to be able to come to conclusions about your endgame, or about your, the particular study to solve these. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. As I've mentioned many times, endgame studies can be very beneficial for your chess calculation and visualization skills. So I would encourage you to come back here in a couple weeks and check out the next one. If you haven't seen the previous one, you could check out the video over there. Also, I have links down below if you want to study these on your own to a couple books that I'm currently studying. This particular study, I don't know if I mentioned, is from this book by Tigran Gorgiev, who was early 20th century endgame composer. And I really enjoy his endgame studies are quite beautiful. So check that out. And again, patrons, you can download the PGN for this study and soon for all of the studies we do here on the Patreon page. Okay, have a great day and good luck with your chess.